Unexpectedly heartwarming, the ugly daughter joke transforms into an inspiring love story. The sun dipped low over the endless fields, casting long shadows that felt heavier than Elsie's heart. She could still hear the familiar laughter of her father echoing in her mind, the joke about the ugly daughter ringing in her ears like chimes made of glass. At 28, Elsie lived on a struggling farm in rural America, surrounded by towering cornstalks that swayed as if mocking her quiet dreams. She longed for escape, and yet, every morning, she found herself tending to the chickens and cows, her own aspirations buried deep beneath the daily toil. But there was a spark. David, the fresh-faced teacher who moved in next door, brought a new rhythm to her life. His laughter danced into her world like sunlight breaking through clouds. Each playful banter sent tremors through her, unraveling the invisible labels her father had placed on her. Perhaps she could be more than the family's joke. Perhaps she could be more. Yet lingering doubts clung to her like the heavy humidity of summer nights. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Elsie dabbled with a brush in her hidden sanctuary, her tiny attic, the colors exploded off the canvas as though they held her fears, aspirations, and a hint of defiance. Each stroke brought a release, shedding layers of self-doubt like the husks of corn blown away by the wind. But every time she caught herself dreaming in vibrant hues, her father's voice emerged again, darkening her spirit. Art was a luxury, he would say, a foolish distraction from the real work of keeping a farm afloat. She shuddered at the thought of disappointing him, yet did she want to live for his approval, or find a space where she could be herself? The conflict raged within her, constricted, her affection for David intertwined with a growing fear of her father's wrath. Torn between loyalty and the yearning to break free, each day felt like wading through thick mud. She could feel the tension tightening like a noose around her creativity. What if, in pursuit of her dreams, she lost the only family she had? What if her art, a rebellious cry for recognition, only deepened her father's disdain? As rumors spread about a local art competition, her pulse quickened with a mixture of excitement and dread. Could this be her chance to step out of the darkness? But the thought of confrontation loomed large. To enter meant defying the very expectations that shaped her existence, a prospect filled with peril but also tantalizing liberation. What would David say? Would the community embrace her, or would she simply cement her father's joke? The air vibrated with unspoken fears, prickling her skin. With all eyes on her, the weight of expectation threatened to collapse around her. The clock in the distance ticked relentlessly, and as the competition day approached, it felt like it marked the end of more than just a chapter. It felt like life or death, a battle between the past and the raw promise of her artistic soul. Would she fall back into her father's shadow, or would she find the courage to claim her own light? Tension coiled around her like vines, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. The echoes of who she was, and who she could become, crashed within her, an unstoppable tide that could either drown her or propel her forward. Doubt wrapped around Elsie like a shroud as the day of the competition drew near. In the early morning light, she stood in front of her easel, staring at the half-finished canvas that seemed both a reflection of her dreams and a mirror of her fears. Every brushstroke felt daunting, as if each choice could unravel everything she had spent years attempting to suppress. And yet, she couldn't stop the rush of ideas flooding her mind. The colors danced, beckoning her to unleash them onto the canvas, to breathe life into something truly hers. Still, the laughter of her father echoed. His voice was a persistent shadow, reminding her of the duties that awaited her on the farm. The pressure bore down heavily, a constant reminder that her family's survival was tied to the land. Was art a luxury she could afford when the chickens needed feeding and the cows required milking? Each day felt like a tether pulling her in two directions, one towards the ambition she yearned for, and the other towards the familial obligations she couldn't ignore. With a deep breath, she picked up her brush and dipped it into the vibrant red paint. The color glided onto the canvas, igniting a flame within her. a flicker of defiance against the clouds of expectation that threatened to consume her. "Who am I without this?" she whispered to herself. It was a question she had asked 1,000,000 times, yet the answer remained elusive. In a moment of impulsive clarity, Elsie decided she would enter the competition. Confronting her fears felt like the only path forward, an act of rebellion against the constraints of her past. What was the worst that could happen? She could fail, thoroughly, embarrassingly. But as those thoughts coiled in her mind, another part of her spoke louder. What if she succeeded? What if she loved it? What would her father do then? The storm raged, intertwining her fear of confrontation with a glimmer of hope. That afternoon, she walked to David's house with the burgeoning determination not only to share her decision, but also to seek his support. There was something about his presence that soothed her weary heart, a balm to her unease. She knocked, feeling her pulse race as she waited. When he opened the door, sunlight framed him, causing her to momentarily forget her plan. Their laughter felt like a release, a sweet respite against the backdrop of her self-imposed turmoil. "David," she said, voice quivering slightly, "I'm entering the competition." His eyes widened with surprise, yet she saw warmth replace any trace of doubt. "Really? That's amazing, Elsie!" he exclaimed, genuine excitement radiating from him like the sun. His affirmation was a lifeline, pulling her forward even as a part of her hesitated. "But what if I fail? What if my father finds out?" The words tumbled out, the weight of her worries now shared between them. David stepped closer, his expression serious yet empathetic. "You have to do this for yourself. Your art is a part of you, and it deserves to be seen. I see you, Elsie, beyond the jokes and expectations." His words hung in the air, mingling with her uncertainties, igniting something deep within her. A secret hope whispered that perhaps this moment could reshape her entire life. The boundaries imposed on her by her father could be pushed further than she imagined. As they discussed her pieces, weaving dreams into reality, Elsie felt herself begin to tremble with a mix of purpose and fear. She was preparing to step into the spotlight, yet the shadows still lurked, ones of her father's expectations and the social stigmas deeply rooted in her mind. That night, Elsie sat in the attic, her paintbrush in hand, grappling with the inevitability of change that lay ahead. It was time to confront the shadows, not only of her father, but of her own self-doubt. Painting became a frantic dialogue between the two, her emotions translating into each stroke as she envisioned dampening the laughter with colors of her triumph. In that critical moment, the realization hit her. This journey wasn't just about entering the competition. It was about daring to define herself outside of the words cast upon her. An intense wave of determination washed over her, overriding the fear that had held her hostage for so long. As dawn began to break, illuminating her canvas with promising light, she caught a glimpse of clarity. The moment of truth was nearing. She wasn't just a farmer's daughter or a punchline, she was an artist. The next question loomed large. Would she have the strength to fight for her vision when it came time to present her work? The answer eluded her as she put down the brush, the final decision swirling in her thoughts. The ultimate test of her courage was yet to come, and she had to prepare for it. What awaited her when she stepped into that room, alongside those who had never known her struggle? Would she emerge as the artist she aspired to be, or retreat into the shadows just like always? The sun poured into the attic through a small window, illuminating the canvas and revealing the vibrant strokes that had sprung from Elsie's heart. With each brushstroke, she'd laid bare her indecision, joy, anger, and hope, the full spectrum of her emotional turmoil. But now, as daylight washed over her work, the hues began to reveal a form, a composition that felt raw, yet powerful. This piece wasn't just paint on canvas, it was her burgeoning identity, and it beckoned her toward an inevitable confrontation, not only with the world, but with herself. As she stepped back, observing the tableau before her, a whisper of doubt crept in. What if the colors were merely noises? What if the composition failed to resonate with others? A mere reflection of her insecurities rather than her brilliance? Elsie clenched her fists, pushing the thought away. The fear of inadequacy lingered like an uninvited guest, but this time she would not let it define her. She remembered David's words, pressing against the edges of her uncertainty. "You have to do this for yourself." The conviction in his voice was a lifeline, and she allowed it to sink deeper into her psyche. Today was not merely about presenting art. It was about asserting her right to be seen as more than just a punchline in her father's stringent world. The thought lived in her mind like a wildfire. She was igniting something within herself, a drive that demanded expression. She wouldn't let her father's shadow shrink her ambitions any longer. She needed to share her vision, to give her art the chance to breathe outside the confines of her attic. With a renewed sense of purpose, Elsie grabbed her palette, the familiar sense of oil paint invigorating her senses. Each color felt like a promise. Focusing on the canvas, she poured all her anxieties into a singular moment of creation. Lines began to form, colors intermingled, and slowly but surely, her subjective world came to life. It was messy at first, a chaotic burst of energy, reflecting her state of mind. Hours passed as she worked feverishly. Lost in the rhythm of her brush and the pulse of her heart, she felt as if she were excavating the artist buried beneath layers of expectation. It was exhilarating, yet sobering, as she confronted the realization that her art might be misunderstood or dismissed. But that didn't matter anymore. What truly mattered was the catharsis of creation, the freedom of expressing her innermost self. As the sun began to dip in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the room, she took a moment to breathe deeply, letting the quiet sink in. It was time to prepare. Her heart raced at the thought of standing before judges and critiques, the unfamiliar faces looming larger than life in her imagination. With lingering apprehension, she thought of presenting not only her artwork, but her story, born from toil and turmoil. What if the judges saw the fear lurking behind her colors? What if they discerned the little girl forever shackled by her father's laughter? What if they drew connections between her art and the cultural norms of their community, the very norms that had dimmed her spirit? In that moment, a new urgency gripped her. What if, instead of fear, she presented her vulnerabilities as the essence of her craft, as a woman defying expectations? The surface of the canvas was not just her rebellion, it was her heart laid bare, vulnerable yet resilient. As she stepped away from the easel, she felt lighter, yet aware that the stakes were high. The competition was approaching, and so was her moment of truth. In the quiet stillness of her attic, Elsie clenched her fists, determination rising within her. The next few days would test her ability to embrace her own narrative, to forge her identity not merely as a daughter, but as a creator. She would find her voice on that stage, for better or worse. Tomorrow would reveal whether she could transform her fear into courage. Would she claim her space in the bright light, or let it slip away like a fleeting shadow? The morning sun filtered through the attic window, its golden rays dappling the floor in a comforting warmth. Elsie stood before her canvas, heart racing with each breath. She sensed the familiar flutter of nerves, the uncertainty buzzing beneath her skin. Today marked not just a display of her creativity, but a moment that demanded she face herself and the world. She adjusted the paintbrush in her grip, its familiar weight feeling both reassuring and intimidating. With every stroke, she became reminded of how her art mirrored her life. Just as she layered colors on the canvas, so too had she layered her emotions, masking her insecurities with camouflaged bravado. It was time to strip away those layers. Though vulnerability lay exposed, it was also liberating. As she prepared, she replayed conversations from the previous days in her mind, David's voice echoing with fierce encouragement. "Art is a dialogue, Elsie. Your truth invites others to share theirs." That wisdom hung heavy and sincere, nudging her toward a deeper understanding of why she created. This wasn't just personal, it was universal. With her brush poised to weave connection instead of separation, she contemplated her vision anew. Boldness surged through her as she laid down the first color, an audacious red that seemed to pulse with life. She thought about her father's laughter, the way it had once echoed like a thunderstorm, drowning her spirit. But she had grown tired of the echoes. Her art was a rebellion against that storm. Quietly, she promised herself that she would not only unveil her work, but she would stand tall as its creator. In the days leading to the exhibition, she absorbed not only the process of painting, but also the gravity of her decision to be visible. Each evening spent refining her piece felt like an act of defiance. She broadened her palette, experimenting with shades she typically shied away from, mirroring her resolution to step out of the shadows of conformity. The vibrant tones she bled onto the canvas transformed into reflections of her essence, every hue capturing an aspect of her journey, a chapter of her story. But still, doubt layered over her determination like the undercurrents of a dark ocean. What if others dismissed her work as a cacophonous outpouring? Perhaps they would think it amateurish, naive. The bounds of her self-accepted worth tightened occasionally, squeezing her resolve until it became a fleeting whisper of doubt. How could she let her insecurities take root again? Drawing a deep breath, she sought balance, embracing the tumult. She licked the paintbrush, tasting the bittersweetness of self-discovery and realization. A personal mantra took root in her mind. To reveal was to embrace, and embracing her truth would fortify her voice. This was not merely a competition, it was a declaration of existence. In the final days before the presentation, her room became a sanctuary abuzz with creativity, yet the weight of impending judgment lingered at every corner. Each day, she conquered layers of hesitation, confronting her inner critic with newfound strength. The more she painted, the more profoundly she understood her vulnerabilities were not weaknesses, but rather the heart of her artistry. The night before the presentation, she sat quietly in the attic, tea cooling in her hands as swirling shadows populated the room. Anxiety swelled as she glanced at her creation, an embodiment of who she was and who she aspired to be. Her palms tingled with the anticipation and uncertainty of what was to come. Would her truth resonate? Would it inspire empathy in anything but disdain? Refusing to yield to fear, she stared at her canvas, her heartbeat steadying in rhythm with her resolve. This was her moment of transformation, not merely as an artist, but as a woman who would no longer dwell in the fringes. As she closed her eyes, grounding herself in the reality of growth, she felt power radiating within her. Tomorrow awaited, and with it came the chance to shine. When she stepped into the light, would it bask in the brilliance of her truth or reveal cracks in her essence? The question hung in the air, electrifying, an unresolved tension promising a tale yet untold. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the attic. Elsie woke with remnants of dreams clinging to her thoughts, dreams filled with color, laughter, and applause. Today was the day. The room felt different, almost sacred, a cocoon where her journey of vulnerability and courage would finally be shared. As she dressed, her heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. Standing in front of the mirror, she made eye contact with her reflection. It was a familiar face, determined yet uncertain. She noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she brushed the last bit of paint from underneath her nails. Each stroke she'd made on the canvas had chipped away at more than just the blankness before her. They had chipped away at who she thought she was. What she saw was more than an artist simply unveiling a painting. She was a woman stepping into her truth, and the thought sent a rush of adrenaline through her. She could almost hear David's voice offering encouragement, wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "Your truth invites others to share theirs." Those words resonated within her, setting off ripples of resolve. Today wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. Walking down the stairs, she felt the weight of each step, not just from the physicality of her body, but the emotional gravity of the day ahead. The wooden creaks underfoot seemed to echo her internal conflict. What would happen if she poured her heart out, only to be met with indifference or criticism? Arriving at the venue, a low hum of chatter filled the air, mingling with the sweet and cloying smell of coffee. Elsie took a deep breath, steadying herself, and stepped inside. The walls around her were lined with the work of other artists, each piece a glimpse into someone else's world. It amazed her how vast the pool of creativity could be, yet she couldn't help feeling small in the midst of such brilliance. Yet, instead of retreating, she drew strength from the surrounding diversity. Here were artists, each grappling with their own fears, unease, and triumphs. This environment pulsated with potential. Their art was as layered with vulnerability as her own. Confirming her inner voice, she found solace in recognizing her shared human experience. As people began to gather around her canvas, a swell of pride mixed with anxiety ballooned in her chest. Each glance, each whispered comment, sent electric currents through her veins. She was aware, acutely aware, of the judgment that loomed like a shadow. But in that moment of eye contact, brief but telling with each visitor, she sensed their curiosity. In their gazes she found a mirror to her own fears and aspirations. Conversations rippled through the crowd, and she heard snippets of responses. Raw, vulnerable, unapologetic. Her heart raced at the realization that her work was speaking to others in ways she had never anticipated. They were seeing her, not just the colors on the canvas, but the raw edges of her truth. A voice broke through her reverie, startling her. What inspired this? A woman, wide-eyed and eager, stood before her, curiosity dancing in her expression. In that moment, sleepiness vanished, replaced with a rush of fervor. Here was an opportunity to share, to let that connection bloom into something more profound. I wanted to show my journey, Elsie began, her voice gaining confidence. The struggle, the fear, and ultimately the release. It's about finding beauty in vulnerabilities. As she spoke, she noticed how her words poured out with increasing conviction, shedding the remnants of doubt like the layers of paint on her canvas. This was not merely her story. It resonated beyond her, beckoning others closer. But as she embraced this newfound connection, a moment of tension flickered in her mind. What if her honesty was met with dismissal? Would she have the strength to stand her ground if someone questioned her sincerity or the merit of her work? This internal struggle ignited a fire within her. Today wasn't merely about presentation, it was a challenge to celebrate her deepest self. And with each interaction, each smile, she leaned into the belief that vulnerability was indeed a source of courage. With her heart pounding, Elsie made a choice. She would not hide from potential rejection. Instead, she welcomed it. Transformation came not from avoiding discomfort, but by embracing it. As she continued to share her vision, a man approached, eyes narrowed in concentration. She could feel the weight of his evaluation, the stakes rising. Would he compliment her work or shatter her fragile confidence with critique? The moment hung in the air, thick with the promise of revelation. A new chapter was about to unfold, one that could either affirm her journey or challenge her sense of self. Would she emerge from this confrontation fortified in her identity or diminished by someone else's perception? The man stood inches from her canvas, his silence stretching like a taut string, filled with each unshared thought. Elsie felt the rush of adrenaline pounding in her ears. He leaned closer, scrutinizing the textures she had layered in a chaotic symphony of color. His furrowed brow filled Elsie with both dread and a spark of adrenaline. A moment hung suspended between them, weighted by anticipation and fear. "What's this?" he finally asked, his voice low and measured yet devoid of harshness. "Are you hiding behind your colors, or do you truly invite us in?" His words struck her like a thunderclap, igniting a whirlwind of emotions. "Invite us in?" She grappled with her response, feeling as though every ounce of strength resided within that simple question. In that split second, she faced the core of her conflict. Was she genuinely ready to let others see her vulnerability? Taking a steadying breath, she met his gaze. "It's both," she admitted, the admission freeing. "The colors, the chaos, it's me. It's my fear hidden in beauty, showing the battle I've fought inside. But I need to express it. I need others to see it." He nodded, as if she had unveiled a deeper truth rather than merely explaining her artwork. His expression shifted from one of critique to understanding. "Then you're winning already," he murmured, stepping back, allowing her space to breathe. A sense of warmth radiated within her, a flicker of recognition that she had risen to the occasion rather than shrunk back into the shadows. Words flowed freely between them. What initially felt daunting had transformed into an engaging exchange. She wanted to share her story, the struggles that had stretched her thin like the paint on her canvas. As they discussed the nuances behind the layers, she noticed his body language relaxing, mirroring her growing confidence. Realizing this wasn't just about art, but connection, the pulse of their conversation guided her further. She began to explore the labyrinth of her own fears out loud. Her self-doubt, her feelings of inadequacy, the countless hours of questioning whether her voice mattered in a world brimming with talent. Each word felt like a release from the self-imposed shackles, laying bare not just her art but herself. As the man listened, she noticed more visitors joining their conversation, drawn in by the energy surrounding her. Their eyes reflected what she had almost overlooked, genuine engagement. Each individual added their perspective, revealing a tapestry woven from their own experiences with vulnerability. "Your work," another onlooker spoke, chiming in, "reminds me of that poem about the delicate balance of strength and fragility. It's true, Being open is daring. It takes strength most people don't possess. Each comment built a scaffolding of belief around her experience. Each affirmation solidified her resolve, expanding the space she had created for herself. But beneath the encouragement, a lingering apprehension shadowed her vitality. Though they celebrated her vulnerabilities, all it would take was one dismissive word to unravel the progress she had made. But in that moment of collective connection, something shifted within her. Instead of fixating on the potential of negativity, she allowed the shared joy to drown out her doubts. Today wasn't merely about proving her worth. It was about embracing the duality of her journey, the courage to stand tall despite fear. Hours passed in warm engagement, and as the crowd began to wane, Elsie felt a deep sense of fulfillment settle in her chest. She had navigated unanticipated interactions that challenged her, yet reaffirmed her identity. For the first time, she sensed her art as a bridge rather than a barrier. But just as she prepared to bask in the aftermath of her achievement, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows, a familiar face, full of unfavorable surprises. David stood by the entrance, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The echo of adrenaline returned, rapidly rising like a crescendo in a symphony. "What are you doing here?" she breathed, caught between exhilaration and dread. The energy around her flickered more slowly, the possibility of rejection looming large once more. Would this reminder of her past shatter everything she had fought for today? The tension grew, binding her in an unexpected duel, one that could redefine the very meaning of her journey. Elsie's heart raced as she processed the sight of David, a figure from her past who had once made her feel small and unworthy. The warmth of the previous conversations dissipated like morning fog, leaving her vulnerable and exposed once more. She couldn't shake the tang of anxiety. It pulsed through her veins, and a frigid chill replaced the glow of confidence she had earned that day. David's arms were crossed, his posture both defensive and critical, as if he were appraising a piece of art he had already judged long ago. The crowd that had surrounded her moments ago seemed to melt away, leaving only the two of them in a tense tableau. "Looks like you're doing just fine," he remarked, his voice laced with a condescending edge. A wave of heat rushed to her cheeks. With every fiber of her being, she fought the impulse to retreat behind defensiveness. "Actually, I'm doing better than fine," she countered, her voice steadier than she felt. "This isn't just a show, it's a part of me." His eyebrow raised, an indication of disbelief or maybe just curiosity. But Elsie couldn't afford to overanalyze his reaction. She had claimed her territory with her canvas and her words, as tumultuous as they were. "What's going on here, Elsie? This is different," he said, finally allowing himself to step closer. The cautious intrigue in his voice acted as both a challenge and an invitation. "Last I saw you, you were hiding behind your sketches." His reference was a reminder that stung, but it also sparked something within her, a fiery determination to prove him wrong. "I was hiding because I wasn't ready," she admitted. "But today, I made a choice not to. This is my art, my story, tangled and beautiful. I'm tired of being someone I'm not." With every word, she could feel shards of her former self breaking away, allowing something new to emerge, something resilient. Was this the moment to confront her past? Could she transform this unexpected confrontation into a stepping stone for growth? David regarded her with a mix of admiration and skepticism, and a flicker of something genuine played across his face. For the first time in a long while, she found herself wanting to delve deeper, to unearth the roots of their shared history. "You made your choice. Why aren't you proud of that?" The words slipped from her mouth before she could reconsider them. His eyes darkened at the challenge, as if she had stripped away the little armor he had. "Because it feels more like a facade, Elsie," he shot back, irritation threading through his voice. "You think you've achieved something here, but have you really confronted what lies beneath?" Her resolve faltered momentarily, trembling at the prospect of revisiting the harsh memories tied to his critique. David had always been someone who saw through her. Nonetheless, this time, he couldn't drag her back into the shadows. "Today isn't about a facade. It's about finding the courage to let others see my truth," she declared, the words spilling forth with newfound ferocity. The air around them thickened with tension, a standoff of sorts, yet beneath it all simmered an electric energy. Could their past inform her present? Could it become a tool for her growth instead of an anchor pulling her down? Just then, the crowd began to part once more. Though distant, voices carried stories of connection and artistry, all the beauty she had achieved. For a brief moment, she could see a new path illuminated ahead, one where fears may linger but don't dictate her worth. Maybe we could explore that truth together, David suggested suddenly, almost hesitantly, still wary, yet intrigued by the fire he hadn't seen in her before. His tentative offer clashed with the pride she felt. Would she dare invite him back into her life? A relationship once tethered by condescension could serve as a crucible, a test of her growth and self-definition. As she considered her response, the canvas behind them, alive with texture and vigor, seemed to pulse with potential. This time, she didn't want to hide. She wanted to engage, to transform. But as anticipation swelled within her, questions surfaced in her mind. Was she truly ready to bridge that gap? Or would she find herself entangled in David's doubts yet again? The decision before her loomed like a brushstroke waiting to meet the canvas, full of promise and peril alike. What would she choose? The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility and uncertainty. Elsie felt the weight of David's gaze, an assessment charged with memories that cut deep. She stood at a crossroads. Her journey was stretching out before her, wild and untamed, a spectrum of past grievances blending with newfound confidence. Every instinct told her to turn away, yet there was a flicker of curiosity igniting her resolve. She took a breath, grounding herself in the vibrant colors of her canvas, silent witnesses to her struggles and triumphs. "I'm ready to explore that truth, but let's get one thing straight, David," she said, firming her resolve. "This time, I won't let you dictate what that truth is or how I should present it. That's my choice to make." His surprise was almost palpable, a brief flash of something she couldn't quite place. Was it respect? Or was it the unease of recognizing his own vulnerability? "Fine then," he said finally, a challenge lacing his tone. "Let's see what this truth looks like." Elsie felt the daring shift in her stomach, both exhilarating and terrifying. "I want to take a trip back to where it all started," she declared, surprising even herself. "Let's visit the place that shaped me, the art school where I felt the most lost. If we're going to face these truths, we should examine the roots without the comfort of distance." David blinked, clearly taken aback. "You want me to go there, after everything?" "Exactly," she challenged, stepping closer as if to bridge the gap of his hesitation. "I want to confront the ghosts from our pasts, to see if they still hold power over me, or if I've outgrown them. You can help me see it, or you can stay where you are, wrapped up in your judgments." A flicker of excitement flashed in David's eyes as he processed her proposition, though he quickly masked it with his trademark skepticism. "You think it's that simple? You can just waltz in there and reclaim your narrative?" "Why not?" Elsie's pulse quickened. Adrenaline surged within her at the very idea. Perhaps this was her chance to lay bare her vulnerabilities to David and herself. "I'm not the same person I was while I was there. I've fought to grow beyond that, and I refuse to be chained by my past." "Next week I'm open," he replied coolly, but she could sense a motive building beneath his carefully watched walls. "I can help you map out the details, and maybe even provide some tough love along the way." Elsie felt a surge of defiance mingled with anticipation. Yes, David could be a catalyst, but she would hold the brush. "You take your shots, and I'll take mine. But if we're doing this, we're doing it together." As if a challenge had been issued, the whole world around them faded except for their silent acknowledgement of this pact. The canvas stretched behind her seemed to hum with life, reflecting the complexities she was now willing to engage with. This metaphorical journey back to the roots of her fears may well become the foundation for a new self-definition. Each brushstroke she laid on canvas from here on would tell a story, her story, no longer defined solely by the whispers of control and judgment from years gone by. She felt that familiar twinge of anxiety subside, replaced by the spark of genuine empowerment. But would David rise to the occasion without resorting to the same dismissive patterns of the past? Would she remain strong enough to confront whatever dark remnants awaited her? Her future lay wide open, charged with the weight of embraced possibility. The countdown to the confrontation had begun, and she had never felt more alive. As she prepared to part ways, her heart thumped with a thrilling blend of excitement and trepidation. What awaited her could either affirm her growth or reveal old wounds she wasn't ready to face. How much truth could she uncover when faced with the ghosts of her past? Would this journey be the key to unlocking her full potential, or would it lead her spiraling back into doubt? The answers awaited, shrouded in the mystery of reckoning. The week leading up to their trip weighed heavily on Elsie. Each day felt like a silent countdown, punctuated by her ever-growing anticipation. In the quiet moments, when she stood in front of her easel, the brush felt both foreign and familiar. The strokes had once been a comfort, a language she used to communicate with herself when words failed. Now they held a deeper significance. They represented a bridge to her past and a pathway to her renewed identity. She spent those days meticulously planning the journey, determined to confront every memento of her history. The walls of her art school had once echoed with the laughter and derision of peers, the sharp critique of instructors that often felt more destructive than constructive. Each corner screamed memories of self-doubt and inadequacy, shadowed by the critique of her work and the darker shadows cast by their judgments. This was not just a visit, it was a reclamation. Her evenings became rituals of reflection, where she would look back on sketches from her school days. There were pieces she had abandoned, emotions she had stifled. They represented failures, a series of half-finished portraits and disjointed concepts that had forgotten the potential she once held. Each one was a testament to a struggle that felt uniquely hers, a reminder of the young woman who had tried so hard to fit in and please others instead of herself. As she reviewed her plans, a realization washed over her. This wasn't merely about facing David or the past, but rediscovering the artist she once aspired to be. She had spent so long hiding behind the expectations of others. That time was over. She resolved to walk into her past, flaws, failures and all, with an attitude of fierce acceptance. It was critical to acknowledge that the artist she had been wasn't so different from the artist she was becoming. Finally, the day arrived. Elsie stood before the gates of the art school, her heart thrumming against her chest like a metronome, syncing with the rush of her breath. A flood of memories washed over her, the pain of criticism and the bright spark of inspiration. She turned to David, who was leaning against a nearby pillar with a bemused expression. For a moment, she felt the weight of apprehension, but she steadied herself with the thought of how far she'd come. "Ready for this?" David asked. His usual bravado felt oddly subdued in the face of her commitment. Elsie took a deep breath, channeling her determination. "More than ever, but let's promise to hold each other accountable. I don't want this to become another cycle of judgment." Her voice carried a steely clarity that surprised her. David nodded, his demeanor shifting as he began to understand the stakes involved. "Right. No second guessing. We're here to uncover truths, not relive the past just for nostalgia's sake." As they stepped through the doors, the ambiance of the hall enveloped them. The familiar scent of linseed oil and paint, the walls adorned with student work, remnants of creativity bursting forth from various eras. It was surreal, and yet the stage felt set for an unearthing unlike any they had ever experienced. But as they walked further, Elsie felt a stirring in her gut, a murmur of doubt that crept in. Would the echoes of judgment still resonate here? Could she really stamp her authority on a narrative that had felt oppressive for so long? The tension thickened around them. Each step she took toward that ultimate confrontation felt increasingly emotionally charged. What truths were lurking just beyond the frame of their shared past? The moment was inching closer, and Elsie felt the weight of it press against her. She could either succumb to her old self or emerge reborn, ready to paint her story anew. The chasm between past and future yawned wide, leaving her teetering on the edge of discovery. What awaited her within those walls could change everything. Would this journey breathe life into her art, or would it plunge her back into the depths of self-doubt? The answers loomed just within reach, pulsing with the energy of potential, waiting for her to seize them. As she inhaled deeply, Elsie felt every fiber of her being urging her onward, ready to bridge the gap between who she used to be and who she had become. Stepping into the main hall, she scanned the familiar surroundings that had once felt so confining, but today they radiated potential. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the imperfections in the wooden beams, the same imperfections she had long ago viewed as flaws. Now they stood as testaments to time, reminding her that beauty often lay within the broken and the flawed. "Let's start with your old studio," David suggested, gesturing toward the door at the end of the corridor, the very space where she had once felt suffocated by expectations. Each step toward the studio door felt momentous, the familiar smells of paint and turpentine wrapped around her, evoking memories both beloved and painful. As she entered, the walls echoed whispers of self-doubt mingling with dreams abandoned, floating like dust motes in sunlight. "I used to spend hours in here trying to impress others," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now it feels different. I'm ready to reclaim it." David met her gaze, his expression a blend of curiosity and encouragement. "Then let's create something new here," he replied, allowing his earlier skepticism to transform into a tentative camaraderie. With renewed determination, Elsie unpacked her materials, as if preparing for the battle of a lifetime. The palette of colors spread before her was a symbolic acknowledgement of her range, a spectrum that represented emotions she had often kept submerged. Every hue was an invitation to paint a new narrative. David stepped back, allowing her space while also keeping an eye on the process. As the brush met canvas, Elsie felt a surge of liberation flow through her. Each stroke was a cathartic release, an opportunity to express everything she had bottled up for far too long. The chaos of her emotions spilled vibrantly onto the canvas, intermingling reds of passion with blues of tranquility and yellows of hope. "What are you channeling?" David asked quietly, his gaze fixed on her in that insightful manner that spurred her deeper exploration of her creative process. With each brushstroke, she could feel the layers of her past unravel. "This is my journey, a mixture of struggles, of fears, of growth and revelation. It's chaotic but beautiful," she responded, embracing the confounding emotions birthed by her time at the art school. As she painted, Elsie caught glimpses of herself in the reflections of her brush. The mistakes she used to fear transformed into strokes of authenticity, displaying her vulnerability not as a flaw, but as a hallmark of her humanity. She was no longer shying away from confrontation. She was digging deeper, uncovering the power that lay in honest expression. In that sacred space, filled with the ghosts of her artistic past, she realized something profound. This was not just about painting. It was about conquering the story that had long held her captive. "Letting your truth flow is the most powerful stroke an artist can achieve," David said, his voice full of quiet respect. "It invites others to be honest in turn." The gravity of his words wrapped around her as she transformed layers into movement. A flash of color defined her new narrative, illustrating the evolution of her identity beyond the joking label of the ugly daughter. Here, amidst bold strokes, she became an artist forging her identity, reclaiming her voice. Hours faded away unnoticed as Elsie poured into her work, emerging from the studio with a piece that spoke volumes, an empowering statement of her trials and triumphs. Finally, as she stepped back to assess her creation, a kaleidoscope of shades whirled before her. Not only had she painted her past, but she had also colored the path ahead. Each hue now felt like a promise. She would embrace her narrative, unfiltered and unapologetic. And just then, the door opened, and figures began to fill the studio, fellow artists from her past. Gasps erupted as they took in her vibrant work, their shadows dissolving into admiration. "Elsie, you've changed," one remarked, her eyes wide with surprise. "This is powerful." Another stepped closer, analyzing the detail, nodding in understanding. "Your heart is in this. It feels raw, yet inviting." Heart-pounding, Elsie recognized this affirmation as an exclamation. She had emerged transformed, no longer defined by the opinions of others, but embraced by her blooming artistry. David smiled as he observed the growing circle of admiration. "You've accomplished what once felt impossible. This is just the beginning." Shifting from awe to sincerity, the questions next emerged. What will you do now? What does this mean moving forward? "I intend to share this journey, my story," Elsie said, her voice unwavering now. "I will continue to create, not for the approval of others, but to explore the deeper truths of my journey." And so it was. Elsie had painted more than colors. She had illustrated her stance. Boundless possibilities awaited her on the horizon, and she was ready to seize every moment. Embracing her artistry within was an accomplishment worthy of celebration. She felt liberated, solid, and confident in her transformed essence, an artist standing boldly in her truth. Not only had she proven to herself her capacity to overcome, but she basked in the recognition that washed over her. The past may have shaped her, but it would no longer contain her. With one final glance at her extraordinary canvas, Elsie smiled. This was the vibrant beginning of a new, fulfilling endeavor, and she was armed with the courage to write the next chapter of her story. Amidst the spirited palette of her artistry, it was time to step into the light, embracing all that she had become. Now, as you conclude this extraordinary journey with Elsie, it's your moment to reflect on the power of personal growth and artistic expression. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about Elsie's transformative journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your support is vital for helping us continue to tell these powerful transformation stories.